Voorhees, the untold story of the horror icons and the man behind the mask, plus why fat comedians rule. Published by the Hopecast Network. Chapter 6. Ashley Arpel, My Star Client. The journey to becoming Ashley's agent. The journey to becoming Ashley's agent, a tale worthy of its own horror movie, sprinkled with the absurdity of a comedy special. Picture this: a middle-aged man, yours truly, and a slightly worn out Subaru zooming across Los Angeles, fueled by dreams that were bigger than my bank account, and ultimately motivated by the ever elusive objective of keeping my son Brad from mocking my vehicle choice. Who knew that a bike cop turned trainer of horror icons would eventually find himself in the treacherous waters of Hollywood agency? It all began when I stumbled upon Ashley Arpel auditioning for what was sure to be a classic B grade horror flick. She was up against a bunch of glamorous actresses who probably could have opened a cosmetic store with the amount of spray tan they were slathering on. Despite the inherent absurdity of the role, let's be honest, every slasher film needs at least one character who trips over nothing while running from a maniac with a machete. Ashley captivated me. I saw potential, albeit wrapped in her own unique brand of quirkiness. It was like watching a confused chicken trying to win a marathon. Suddenly, I thought, here's a woman who could redefine the genre, a genuinely Jewish actress ready to conquer R rated horror. Of course, convincing Ashley that she needed an agent took a bit of work. I mean, how does one broach the subject without sounding like a hopeful con artist? I approached her cautiously, saying something like, I'm your new agent. Let's take on Hollywood one cheesy slasher flick at a time. That might not have been my exact pitch, but just imagine me dressed like a used car salesman, and you get the picture. When she agreed to let me represent her, I couldn't help but feel like I had trained Jason Voorhees himself. Who needed a scary movie when you have the audacity to step into the realm of talent management? One of the first hurdles was navigating the rocky terrain of R rated landscape. It's not a simple minefield of blood and guts. It's filled with agents who seem to hold a sinister grudge against anyone not wearing designer clothes. Here I was, a man with a passion for helping a talented actress shine in films that made parents across America clutch their pearls. But navigating this world served as a hilarious crash course in how to convince producers that Ashley was the final girl they didn't know they needed. I channeled all my training from the killers I had worked with, always negotiating with a maniacal glint in my eye, fueled by absolute absurdity. Ashley was proud of her heritage, and I firmly believe that would be an asset in the industry. You see, I had a theory that casting couch must secretly have a few more cushions that were soft and fluffy. In a world with skinny actresses vying for the same roles, an authentic Jewish star signified something fresh. I spent countless hours assembling ridiculous pitches, incorporating her background. I was sure we were into something. Imagine I'd announced dramatically to producers, a Jewish woman fighting against a killer with a low carb diet. If nothing else, I could entertain them with my nonsensical pitches. As I dived deeper into the insanity of casting calls, I learned why fat comedians are so beloved in Hollywood. They have this innate ability to embrace life's absurdities. They could flop on the floor, clutch their stomachs, and bring laughter at the most horrifying moments. So, using this insight, I decided to market Ashley as the chubby heart of any R rated flick. Who wouldn't want to watch a heroine who could make audiences laugh while simultaneously screaming at a masked unicorn on a rampage? One of my more memorable moments as Ashley's agent was during a pitch meeting with a rather famous producer. Think Hawaiian shirts and dubious hair choices. I confidently threw down all of Ashley's potential while everyone stared blankly, possibly waiting for me to announce our upcoming season of Horror Icons Kitchen. 30 minutes in, I realized that if anyone were actually terrified in that room, it was Ashley. As she scuttled under the table, when he began discussing his previous extravagant yacht parties, it was a strange but pivotal moment, and I knew there that she was meant for greater things. And that, my friends, is how I became Ashley's agent. It was a journey littered with absurd threats of Hollywood rejection, lively debates over the beauty of the half loaf in our lunch lineup, and more laughter than I could have ever anticipated. There's a certain delight in standing behind a hopeful actress who, despite all odds, was determined to find a place in R rated horror films. In short, my life became a macabre vision of The Office, half fantasy, half horror, and entirely bewildering. Navigating the R rated landscape. Navigating the R rated landscape in Hollywood is like trying to survive a haunted house built by a committee of sadistic clowns while blindfolded on crutches. I swear there was a moment when I thought I'd suddenly find myself in a slasher film, bracing for the close up of my horrified face. From the very first meeting, I realized that I had not only signed on to be Ashley Arpel's agent, but also to engage in a full contact sport. There was no ordinary career path. This it was a gladiatorial arena where the spectators were directors sporting questionable granola bars and producers who had long forgotten what sunlight looked like. One of the key rules of surviving this mayhem is picking your battles. First and foremost, rejection is more common than slasher movie cliches in a Hollywood screenplay. Every time they said no to Ashley, I felt like I'd been stabbed with an exaggerated prop knife, full of fake blood and outlandishly cheesy sound effects. I would dance around like a horror film victim, throwing my hands in the air, while a potential opportunity slipped through my fingers like Jason playing with his latest weapon. It certainly didn't help that her high pitched screams of excitement often echoed in my mind long after the meeting was over. This director is working with the guy who directed a movie with talking dogs. I mean, who would want in on the magical chaos? And let's not forget the language of the industry. Honestly, navigating the jargon was like trying to decipher an ancient prophecy written in hieroglyphics. Words like markability and quadrant were thrown around with such reckless abandon that I half expected to see an R rated bingo card filled with cliches and buzzwords. I quickly became a translator, turning the cryptic message from producers, we want edgy but relatable, into something that resembled coherent thought. How about we show Ashley fighting zombies while making a kugel? I suggest with mock seriousness, hoping it would resonate just enough to make them blink. As I drove deeper into this world, I began to understand how vital it was to stay true to Ashley's unique persona while catering to the bizarre demands of the R rated genre. I learned that horror films are not just about scares. They're also about comedy, visually shocking moments, and sometimes a generous sprinkling of pizza references. You see, you can't take yourself too seriously in a world where the plot twist involves a possessed toilet. The most fun I had was during those candid brainstorming sessions when we brainstormed how to own the horror genre while dripping with humor. How about a horror film where a hero must conquer his fears of public restrooms? I offered, only to be met with Ashley's wide eyed filled with absurd possibilities. Despite, despite the surreal nature of the R rated universe, there was a sense of community that I discovered. After all, everyone was looking for the next big break in the chaos of blood and bad script writing. I began to bond with other agents over absurd experiences. One guy even claimed to have pitched a film where a group of killer fitness instructors terrorized a yoga studio. Who knew that fear and slaughter would intersect so beautifully? We shared snacks at parties, those mixed and matched arrangements of food that left my stomach pondering life choices, and exchanged war stories about heart stopping additions. In short, I was becoming a part of this wild ecosystem of betas where the terror level fluctuated between audition horror stories and excessive caffeine consumption. Down the line, we faced the ultimate challenge, fighting for projects that weren't strictly made for the pale and skinny. Suddenly, I found myself giving impassioned speeches about the unprecedented talents of heavier actors, citing comedic geniuses as the hidden terror of R rated cinema. Imagine the world where audiences cheer for horror icons who would rival Chris Farley, I exclaimed, spilling my drink everywhere in the process. The reactions were mixed. Some producers squinted while others laughed nervously, clearly questioning their choices in life. As I navigated the strange landscape, I learned one fundamental takeaway. The only thing more exaggerated than horror film plots is the determination of those who inhabit Hollywood. With absurdity, humor, and a sprinkle of chaos, I began to realize I was ready for the fight. Forget the mask killers. My biggest opponent was the ridicule of the casting couch. And as I embraced the madness around me, I couldn't help but relish the fact that I was making my way through the R-rated jungle, armed only with my wit and a half loaf of bread. As Ashley's agent, I knew we were destined to make our mark in a world where laughter and horror existed hand in hand. Ashley, the only Jewish actress in horror. Ashley Arpel, talented, bold, and let's be honest, proudly Jewish. If you ever seen a slasher flick and thought this could really use a hefty dose of matzo balls and nachos, then you, my friend, are in luck. The horror genre was a kaleidoscope of characters, but somehow there seemed to be an overwhelming lack of Jewish representation in films filled with murderers, masked villains, and buckets of fake blood. Enter Ashley, the only Jewish actress poised to change the landscape of R rated horror, one well timed kvetch at a time. The moment Ashley and I connected, it felt like a cosmic joke played by the filmmaking gods. Myself, a former bike cop turned legendary trainer of horror monsters, and her, the perfect blend of talent and Jewish identity so genuine it could heal the world. Picture this. While my colleagues were busy pushing athletic, flawless specimens toward producers, I was advocating for Ashley's strengths. I mean, who doesn't want to see a heroine throwing a decent bagel at a villain? I began daydreaming about scenes where she'd take down a rampaging madman while shouting phrases from Hebrew school. Just imagine, it could completely redefine what it means to be a final girl and add some good natured Jewish guilt into the heart of horror. As we navigated the auditions, preparing for our pitch meetings, it became evident that Ashley needed to embrace her unique brand of humor. There is a specific flair to Jewish comedy, self deprecating wit blended with bold honesty, perfect for horror. I mean, if we're going to make an impression, she had to be fearless. So I put together a bold strategy: blend the high stakes drama of horror with classic Jewish storytelling. Who wouldn't want to watch Ashley deliver a monologue about her family's obsession with brisket directly before battling a killer with a garlic stuffed steak knife? The filmmaker's jaws could drop, and Hollywood's history would remember that iconic moment. But with this brilliant concept came the challenge of educating skeptics. What does Jewish culture have to do with slashing and screaming? They'd ask. Their brows furrowed like they'd just stepped in gum. I'd responded by launching into symbolic R rated metaphors. Slasher films are essentially our modern day Passover, escaping from danger and making it all meaningful. Yes, sometimes people look confused, but most were entertained enough to swipe their credit cards at the idea of a Jewish heroine fighting back against Guy in a mask stereotyped armed with a bagel and a witty retort. Throughout the process, we fortuitously found that Jewish humor isn't just about punchlines. It carries a strong sense of community and resilience. Audiences crave repetition that mirrors their own experiences, representations that mirror their own experiences. And guess what? It's high time that Jewish women took center stage amidst chainsaws and screaming. Our excitement peaked when we considered two genres coming together to create a niche market for Ashley: Jewish horror. Think The Omen meets Fiddler on the Roof, minus the singing, plus a touch of mayhem. We even brainstormed creative titles for Ashley's future films: Kosher Slasher, or maybe Malice. I laughed so hard I practically fell out of my chair, imagining scenes of villainous matzo balls bouncing around the screen. Who wouldn't want to see someone rage against the horror remakes or comment on the absurdity of holiday meals while duct taped to a chair? Suddenly, it was clear that Ashley could not only survive the genre, she'd thrive in it. To our surprise, we discovered that concept of a Jewish actress in horror brought unexpected depth to the material. Picture a perfectly timed quip right before leaping into action. Perhaps Ashley could chuckle at her struggles while keeping her challah bread from going stale, while dis- dispatching a masked villain in a dramatic chase scene. It was a clearly different approach, one where Jewish elements colored the characters, injecting warmth into the terrifying situations. Ultimately, Ashley's unique identity was not just an unusual angle in the horror genre, it became a force driving the plot forward. She was transcending stereotypes by embracing her heritage and paving the way for future actresses in horror. While every pitch we slowly chipped away at the doubt, Ashley was on the brink of redefining the industry, one wisecrack and one heroic moment at a time, proving that while horror may seem stem from terror, it flourishes with the hidden humor of humanity. And if that wasn't a script worth writing, I don't know what is. So yes, horror needs a Jewish actress, and I was ecstatic that I found the best to fill the void. Now, if I could just get her to agree on the importance of bagels during our next pitch. The unfiltered truth about Hollywood. The unfiltered truth about Hollywood. If you think life in Tinseltown is all sparkle gowns and dreamy gazes into sunsets, let me assure you, it's as much about peering into the dumpster behind the overhyped diner and wondering why you ever thought LA would be fun. The whole experience of being an agent, especially for someone as quirky as Ashley Arpel, has been a masterclass in surrealism. Think Salvador Daft meets an 80s horror flick. As I attempted to pave a path for my Jewish Martin Scorsese, I was repeatedly face to face with the whimsical fabric of an industry often run by the absurd and the alarming. First off, let's discuss the reality of meetings. Every single gathering feels like stepping into an episode of Survivor, but with more existential dread and a significant increase in awkward pauses. You walk into these offices, and there are always that one producer who thinks wearing sunglasses indoors is a demographic advantage. They twitch nervously, shuffling through their butterfly collection while munching on gluten-free kale chip. Try pitching Ashley during that peculiar highbrow performance art show without losing your mind. I tried once saying, "This film needs a strong female protagonist, and Ashley is the secret weapon." To which they replied, "Have you considered if your words could be a soft male whisper instead?" What does that even mean? I wanted to yell, "This isn't a romance novel, it's horror." Moreover, there's a reputation for everything being a hot topic: social media fads, trending hashtags, and what what's the influencer doing this week? I kid you not. I drew my best idea out of only to hear responses like, "Can we make this pitch more TikTok friendly?" What about flash mobs? Flash mobs? Did I miss the memo on chase the killer and dance? It's as if every decision spins like a game show wheel, turning until you can't differentiate your slasher flick from an antidote on salad preparation. I often felt like a contestant on The Price is Right, but was instead bargaining for the survival of a horror franchise. Weirdly exciting and yet horrifyingly confusing at the same time. If you think we're all just sipping cocktails while discussing cinematic masterpieces, think again. Underneath the plastic smiles and exciting stories are hidden agendas and oceans of contradictory statements. There's a secret handshake method for understanding producer lingo. We want something edgy, they say, euphorically tossing their hair, but not too edgy. Is it just me, or does that feel like you're trying to dance on a tightrope while juggling chainsaws? I'd find myself brainstorming ideas that went from brilliant to borderline absurd within 5 minutes. What if the killer wears a yarmulke and wraps while chasing the victim? It's mind numbing. Who knew that all my diversity points could cost me my sanity? Once you make it past the gatekeepers, there's the whole audition circus. Actors jostle for positions like they're in a shopping mall on Black Friday. And then there's Ashley, who, in those scenarios of high pitched anxiety, managed to keep her cool. I'd watch her walk into auditions, clutching papers that felt like they were getting heavier and heavier, as if the universe itself conspired against us. The competition was vicious. I mean, it is truly necessary to wear heels in a horror audition. It was like an Olympic sport. I often provided her with advice such as, just imagine the killer is coming for your lunch. Fight back, if only for the mere distraction of reasoning. Then there's the reality of waiting. Oh, let's not forget the waiting. Auditions morph into silent black holes where time stretches longer than elastic in a horror movie's killer's mask. When you spend hours waiting to hear back, your mind starts playing tricks on you. I sometimes pictured that the casting directors were filming a 5 season reality show titled Waiting for Ashley. I'd imagine they would be seated around a table, casually chatting while we sat in the waiting room like fellow contestants in some sick new game. Occasionally, I'd catch Ashley muttering under her breath something profound like, if this is what being an artist means, I want a refund. Through all of the chaos, it hit me. The true, unfiltered store truth about Hollywood is that it's an elaborate game where everyone tries to outwit one another while concealing their vulnerability with sharp wit. Ensuring Ashley's place in the misadventure of grotesque brilliance became about balancing the ridiculous with the reality of ambition. There's beauty and laughability, and the absurd lengths we traverse, and ultimately, it's a twisted journey of faith in one another to keeps us forging ahead. So the next time you see an oddball addition or an artist conforming to scissor welding horror villains, remember it's all part of the Hollywood alchemy, where the unfiltered truth is crafted layer by layer into something fantastically bizarre. Memorable moments with Ashley. Memorable moments with Ashley Arpel, an actress who can somehow combine sheer terror with her comedic genius. If I had a dime for every time we found ourselves in a surreal situation, I'd probably have enough to open my very own falling horror film studio, complete with a catastrophe corner, from auditions fraught with absurdities to pitch meetings that felt more like a twisted game of charades. Our adventures together have been a whirlwind of hilarity and bewilderment. One standout moment occurred during an audition for a role that was clearly meant for someone more, shall we say, conventionally horror material. Ashley was up against skinny, faceless actresses. Her most notable talents included a mastery of super fast running and awkward scream crying. I watched her step forward, armed only with her impressible spirit and a spark of sass that would light the darkest abyss. The scene depicted a horrifying chase through a dimly lit cabin where a mass killer lurked, and inch by inch the tension escalated. Ashley turned the terrifying script into a one woman comedy. As she prepared to perform her dialogue, Ashley suddenly stopped mid sentence and exclaimed, "Wait a minute, is there a cooking class nearby?" She then proceeded to envision the killer as a culinary diva gone rogue, ready to whip up a four-course dinner the final showdown. Before the final showdown, the casting director laughed so hard that I was convinced there would be an impromptu prize for best improv. In this traditionally tense edition, Ashley originated something joyful and absurd, and in that moment, I realized she was truly in a league of her own. Another memorable ordeal unfolded during a pitch meeting with an eccentric producer who dressed like he just stepped out of the 1970s sci-fi film. Let's just say he was very enthusiastic about everything, gesturing wildly while sporting a Hawaiian shirt that could have caused an eyesore. Ashley and I braced ourselves for the inevitable brainstorming chaos that laid ahead. Our pitch centered on a terrifying plot involving a haunted deli, a crazy rabbi, and the world's meanest pastrami sandwich. You could smell the confusion in the air. As I cited my ideas practically fizzling like popping popcorn on the edge of his frazzled mind, Ashley chimed in with an inspired quip. What if instead of screams, we have people yelling, "Oh, they," during the chase scenes? To my utter astonishment, the producer threw his head back and roared with laughter. And just like that, we were gaining momentum. That meeting abruptly turned into a creative frenzy prepped with Jewish food and references blended in horror. It was absurd. One moment we were pitching a killer sandwich concept, and by the end I was almost convinced we were working on the next Monty Python, but with more jokes about brisket. Those meetings became tangled in spectacular messes of wittiness and creativity, with Ashley leading the charge, armed with clever comedic relief that made the madness surprisingly palatable. Then there was a time we decided, against all exterior wisdom, to visit the haunted maze together. It was a spur of the moment decision, and the thrill of experiencing genuine horror was ployed with the giddiness of the two of us being clueless middle aged panic enthusiasts. I got overwhelmed by the tension while Ashley simply laughed as eerily dressed actors jumped out and scared, tactically flaunted their rubbery props. Hey, what are they scared of? I'm the one wearing a sweater in 90-degree heat, she quipped, leaving me a mixture of terrified and amused. I was surprised when her carefree spirit became infectious, and instead of fleeing in horror, we were caught in fits of laughter, a uniquely delightful bonding moment that could have doubled as a commentary for a horror comedy. And I will never forget the day Ashley tried to make a horror themed cooking video and took an unexpected nosedive. The angle was simple, combining the words of indie cooking with the eerie slants of horror films. It began with a thrilling monologue about how killing vegetables could be an art form. I was standing right off camera, off. I was standing right of off camera, off amazed at how well she could veer between frightening chef and charming home cook. However, while slicing a particularly stubborn onion, a cacophony erupted as she set off our smoke detectors. Amongst a mling of shrieks, smoke, and a fear of being misplaced in her own kitchen while trying to recreate flesh from the feast, she turned to the cameras and proclaimed, "Well, at least we know that the meal wasn't a total disaster. It's alive." It was one of those chaotic highlights of our collaboration where her embrace of that perfectly imperfect attitude showcased everything we loved about working together. Memorable moments with Ashley Arpel are woven into our shared fabric of sheer absurdity, creativity, and relentless humor. From the heart pounding chaos of auditions to the unpredictable comedic brilliance of pitch meetings and cooking calamities, we forged a bond that could thrive even in the most bizarre of scenarios. And there's one takeaway from these adventures. It's that Ashley and I are on a journey that equal parts terror and laughter, proving once again that while horror makes the heart race, humor soothes the soul. So here's to many more bizarre escapades where a little laughter conquers dread and creativity knows no bounds. The Hopecast Network has reached out to MTD for further questioning on all these events. At this time, his whereabouts are unknown. It takes two, baby.